you remember a couple of weeks ago, President Joe Biden pretended he cared about border security because obviously it's hurting Democrats in the polls. So he made a perfunctory trip down to the border, didn't do much, didn't say much, but then he put forth this, well, pretend policy where they're really going to get tough and they're going to secure the border. And then at the same time, they said they were doing this thing called parole, where they would let up to 30,000 people in, sort of a amnesty. Every single month, 30,000 people coming in across the border. Come on in, get a job, whatever you want. Didn't quite seem right. Certainly doesn't seem legal, thankfully. They're getting sued over it. 20 states are suing the Biden administration over this policy, led, of course, by Texas and their great Attorney General, Ken Paxton, who joins us now. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General, for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for starting this lawsuit. It's an important one. And tell me if I set it up wrong, but this parole thing that they put forth, where is it in the federal law that the president has the discretion to just say, sure, 30,000 people enter the country illegally, we're not going to do anything about it?
So now you're asking about whether it's federal law. No, they don't deal with federal law. They actually wrote it down in a notepad in the White House and decided they were going to do it. But there's nothing authorizing this violation of law. That they have made it up, and this should be something that was passed through Congress if they want to do it. But they don't bother to go to Congress to get what they want done. They just make it up, do it themselves, and act like there is no Congress.
And by the way, I've looked at part of the president's statement when this thing came out and whether he can exercise this discretion. There was something in there that said maybe, yes, you could do this on a case-by-case basis. This doesn't sound like they're using individual discretion on a case-by-case basis at all.
No, and that's not uncommon to have a case-by-case analysis. I mean, sometimes there may be extenuating circumstances that may cause you to do something that you outside the normal process, but not to set a rule saying we're just going to have our own process that's outside the normal process and allow 30,000 people from Haiti, Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua just to come on into the country, even though they're not supposed to do that by law.
Yeah. There was a time when states that tried to sue the federal government over their neglect of the border security, and states have to deal with the financial and other criminal repercussions of those policies, that they didn't have a whole lot of luck in federal courts suing the federal government over border policies because it's exclusively the federal government's purview. But you, Mr. Attorney General, you've had pretty good luck here. Maybe it's not luck. Maybe you fight the right fights. Tell me how this one's going to play out.
Look, I don't see how we don't win this. There's nothing in the law that lets Biden just say, I want 30,000 people from these countries coming into my country every month, and we're going to pay for them to fly in. We're going to pick where they go. And then it's up to the states that we send them to take care of the problems, whether it's crime or whether it's just the cost of educating them or health care or law enforcement. You guys take care of it. We're going to get them here, and we're going to keep doing it. And by the way, the people that vote on this in Congress, they have nothing to do with this. I'm deciding.
I got to ask you then, I mean, given Mayor Eric Adams of New York and all of his grandstanding that he's doing, going down to the border, because suddenly he's starting to feel the pinch that your border cities and pretty much every city in Texas has had to deal with. Is he advocating that New York join your lawsuit here?
New York has not volunteered to be part of this. They've complained more about Texas than they have the Biden administration. The reality is New York has a minor, minuscule problem of a few hundred, maybe a few thousand. We get 5, 6, 7,000 a day coming across our Texas border. So it's a little hard for me to be sympathetic with him. And he's been very critical of our governor of our state, despite the fact that our problems are magnified by multiples of literally thousands from what his problems are.
What's got to be really frustrating for you, Mr. Attorney General, is that anybody who visits Texas, visits the border towns, any part of Texas really, they'll know immediately how incredibly welcoming Texas has always been to immigrants coming the legal way, crossing the border the proper way and appropriate way. There's great integration, there's great assimilation. Texans are Texans no matter where they originally come from, as long as they follow the law. So it's got to be very frustrating that you've had to bear the brunt of all of this criminal activity.
Yeah, and the reality is it's criminal activity from the Biden administration, because what they are doing is partnering with cartels, and they basically told the cartels, bring as many people here as you can. We understand you're going to make a lot of money, 10,000 a person, 8,000 a person. We also know you can run your drug a lot easier. And that's the deal. And that's unfortunate because that has devastating impact on our state. We love immigrants. but we need it done the right way. We need to figure out what the right number is. And this administration doesn't care about that. They just want these people here at any cost.
I think it's very important, Mr. Attorney General, to drill down on that last point here if we could, and we'll try to get your video back up here, because the Biden administration and the Democrats, they almost pretend like that people on the other side of the border, the coyotes, the human smugglers, the drug cartels, that they don't read the newspapers, that they don't have smartphones, they can't watch what's going on in Washington, D.C. The second they announced this policy of 30,000 parolees coming in and skirting the immigration laws, Mr. Attorney General, those drug cartels, those human traffickers, that became a new marketing plan for them. They can now get new customers and say, hey, 30,000 a month, let's go.
No, they literally couldn't have asked for a better program from the Biden administration. And the unfortunate thing is the Biden administration knows this. It's not like this is some surprise that if we don't build a wall and we don't enforce the law, we don't do remain in Mexico, we don't stop catch and release, it's not surprising that millions of people would come across the border and the cartels would benefit from that. That's exactly what the Biden administration expected. And they're good with that. They want that for some reason.
Now that you have a Republican majority in the House of Representatives, what do you think they should be doing? I know that they're going to be investigating Secretary Mayorkas. I know that that might lead to impeachment proceedings, and that's important. I think it is. I think he's been a disaster. But what policies should they be putting forth here in the House?
Look, I think they need to, it's a little confusing because there are already good laws in place. I think they ought to investigate what's going on at the border and why they're not following the law. And we've got remain in Mexico. If they need to reauthorize it, let's do it. That was a huge success for the Trump administration. Stopping catch and release, building the wall, reauthorizing money for building the wall. We know what works because we saw it work in the Trump administration. Let's do those same things again because they work.
Meanwhile, over on the Senate side, I mean, we've got the spectacle of some Republicans actually talking about working out some deal with Democrats over what they're calling comprehensive immigration reform. As you just said, they don't need new reforms, right? The laws are already in place. The laws are already there. So why do you think Republicans are walking down this path?
I think they're frustrated. I think they're realizing that the Biden administration, no matter what's passed, is not necessarily interested in enforcing any laws. It's similar to what would happen in Venezuela. We've got a guy that just does what he wants to do. So I think the only way to address this, really, since we have laws already in place, is one, reappropriate more money for the border and for building this wall. But two, start investigating and asking the questions of Mayorkas and the Biden administration is why they're not following the law and the consequences to the American people as a result of that.
We're speaking with Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas, and we're almost out of time, but I would love for you to spend, not a lot of people get to actually talk about the impact on their states. We talk about the financial impact, what's happening in the schools and jobs and things like that. What about the criminal element that you have to deal with and what your towns have to deal with?
You know what, I think the hardest part for me is just seeing all these kids that have died from fentanyl overdoses, knowing that we could have prevented a large percentage of it. And you know, I know families that have lost children, shockingly great kids who took something they didn't know they were taking, and they died. I think that's the hardest thing that I've had to deal with. Obviously, we have a high degree of property crime along the border. I've talked to ranchers that have had to move away because they're not safe, yeah. and the people that are there don't feel safe. So it's a huge problem.
I assure you, every time the Biden administration sees a brand new lawsuit filed and Ken Paxton, Attorney General of Texas, name is on it, they freak out because you're always on the right side of these things. And like I said, your track record so far, pretty darn good fighting those fights, Mr. Attorney General.
All right. Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate it. We're going to keep fighting because, look, it's the only way we can protect our state and our country.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. As soon as the Biden administration announced these so-called reforms, when he did that show down at the border, we told you we were going to stay on top of it. We told you we were going to be following up. Now, if only the House of Representatives also took that lead. You just heard it from the man who was the tip of the spear on these fights. They need to step up, and they have to find out why the Biden administration refuses to enforce existing laws. No need for new laws. No need for comprehensive reform. No need for any new legislation. Enforce the laws we have now as written. More to come on O'Connor tonight.